Welcome to this Frequency Matters podcast. I'm Pat Hindle, and I'm here with my co-host Eric Higham. Today, we're talking with Steve Douglas, Head of Market Strategy at Spirent Communications. Welcome, Steve.
Good to be here, Patrick and Eric.
Spirent recently released their sixth annual 5G Outlook report, and based on the analysis and takeaways from 415 new 5G engagements globally in 2024. So a lot of data there. With 5G era now at its midpoint, the report takes a look at the first 5 years of 5G and kind of highlights some of the key tactics being prioritized to grow revenues and opportunities in the second half of 5G's implementation. So I thought it'd be a great idea to kind of dive into some of the details of this report. Steve, what is the state of 5G standalone and 5G advanced testing?
Yeah, great question, Patrick. I mean, I would say, the first wave of 5G that we saw up until this point in time has primarily been focused on what they called non-standalone, which was really just adding the 5G radio capabilities, but anchoring it onto our 4G LTE networks. And while that was sort of good enough to give people sort of I would say, an initial flavor of what 5G could offer in terms of, slightly higher speeds, it really wasn't revolutionary in terms of the new capabilities to unlock some of the revenue potential. So the industry has really been focusing on the next stages of 5G, which is really what we would call true 5G, which is really adding the new 5G core network, and a lot of the new capabilities, which are really around the various industries, enterprises, and also towards the consumer. And this is what the first wave is called 5G standalone, for this true version, and then 5G advanced is really a suite of new capabilities coming out from the various standards releases that are coming over the next few years. So up until the end of last year, out of about 650 operators globally, only 64 of them had really started to upgrade onto 5G standalone. And a big challenge for them, Patrick and Eric, was very much that this move to standalone really introduced, I would say, two major new capabilities that the industry hasn't really had to deal with before. The first of those was the core network itself was moving from a traditional sort of monolithic hardware type of solution to a cloud native architecture. And that was a pretty hefty, not only technology challenge, but also an operational and process challenge. And the secondary one was really around then the migrationary path to that. How do you upgrade? How do you bring that in across a national deployment, where you have the first wave of 5G, and how do you incrementally bring that out, starting potentially with sort of maybe large metropolitan sites, and that's sort of an ongoing process at the moment. So what we're sort of seeing today is, you've got those leading operators who've taken that first step to move to 5G standalone. They're now going across, starting sort of more national deployments with it. And then you've got a wave of sort of fast followers now over the next few years. We expect to see, another 100 plus operators start that process. And of course, in the background, they're incrementally adding new features and capabilities through these 5G advanced releases, targeting very much sort of enterprises, private network environments, enhancements to fixed wireless access, etc.
So if we can expand on that a moment. A few seconds ago, you mentioned cloud native, and we're hearing a lot about 5G cloud native core. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, as I said, this was a pretty big change in the architectural design around 5G, which was, we had a first wave of early virtualization, but this really was moving to sort of a really a cloud native, or what you'd have saw the hyperscalers doing. So, a microservice architecture broken down to very small components that could have dynamic scalability and automation around it. And the idea around that was very much to create a level of new flexibility and agility in terms of how the network operated. It could, rapidly scale out as demand required. You could add new services very quickly. But obviously that also, creates a challenge for how operators has historically operated their networks, the processes, the procedures, the skill sets their people have. And that's sort of been the big challenge to this date. I'll give you one really good example. Most operators today are pretty much used to having maybe one or two major software or upgrade releases in their core networks per year. Now you're suddenly moved to a cloud native which environment, which really is an IT software environment, and you're seeing the frequency of those software upgrades coming, weekly in many cases, and that suddenly creates a completely new paradigm. How do I manage and operate the network when I've got all these software releases, patches, upgrades coming all the time? The volume velocity just increasing rapidly. How do I get all of them tested? How do I get them through my processes and then out into the operational environments? So while there's a huge opportunity with the architecture, the challenge up to this point has really been more the operational procedures and making sure they're in place to support it.
And so, Steve, how about 5G security and resilience? That's kind of a growing concern. What does the report say about that?
Yeah, I mean, this was an interesting takeaway in the report, I would say from an infrastructure side. We saw really a heightened focus on security and resilience testing last year for those operators that were upgrading to standalone and rolling out the new 5G core. Now, a large percentage of this was driven by sort of, I suppose, the unfortunate events where a number of networks, not only telecom networks, have been breached, over the last 18 months. And we're seeing more and more types of attacks on networks, whether they're sort of state sponsored or, from large hacking groups. Obviously, moving to this more IT software architecture, a lot of the operators have put, a large focus and priority, rightly so, and not only making sure that the security is robust to sort of detect and protect their networks, but also that they have the resilience in place to actually respond and recover, if in that case maybe something has got through, so they're not sort of, the network isn't down for prolonged periods, or they can isolate an issue. And obviously a big focus of that has been around these new cloud native functions and making sure that they are completely resilient to the potential risks or the performance degradations of that underpinning cloud environment or cloud stack. Now, of course, that actually has an additional benefit, that the operators have identified, and we saw during the testing, is that if you can demonstrate the resilience to the underpinning cloud environment, it also makes it easier for you to migrate those cloud native functions to different stacks or different suppliers, cloud environments, so that you avoid potential lock-in. And I would say the other sort of key takeaway just on the security side of it was a really interesting move to go beyond what I would say the basic security testing and compliance testing that has historically been done. Up until this point, a lot of the testing has typically focused on the industry 3GPP standard. It's a thing called the security assurance specifications, which are a good baseline for security on the system. But a lot of operators were now saying, hey, well, that's great. Why don't we start testing day zero, the unknowns? What happens if we get an attack that's simply not known? And how would our systems cope with that? Would they respond to that? Would they detect it? Could we recover from that? They're really starting to think about those that are sort of, hey, what's the future going to look like when we start to see these really unknown attacks that we've never seen or had to deal with before? Can we cope with that? And I think that's a good learning. This is something the IT industry, big enterprises have been doing for a while. And I think it's really positive we're now seeing it, the telecom sector, thinking as well and taking that next level of security, very, very seriously.
So related a bit, I think, to those topics of security and resilience, how's the demand shaping up for quality of experience testing and competitive benchmarking for key service offerings?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're really building these networks, if there's demand and there's value out there. And I think, the quality of experience has become a really hot topic, and it was a hot topic we highlighted in the report last year. A lot of operators who have been incredibly successful in the first wave of 5G for new services such as fixed wireless access. So that opportunity, to bring 5G to the home, so you don't necessarily need a fiber or cable connection. And in many markets, especially areas like North America, that's become incredibly popular, and it's also incredibly lucrative. The subscriber value to an operator is very, very high in terms of their monthly prices, but also in terms of the opportunity to upsell once they've landed there. People tend to buy additional packages off the operator, maybe family plans, maybe TV, video, movie orientated plans. And obviously, a key for the operators in this case is making sure that they don't lose those customers. They've attained them. The retention has become a really hot topic, and quality of experience has sort of become the number one sort of issue there. Making sure that the service delivered is really good. And there was a couple of key areas we identified in the testing that our customers were highlighting to us. In many cases, the operators are able to visibly see that they're providing you a good 5G connection to your house, but inside the home, you're maybe not having a great experience. And the question is why? And typically, you go onto a Wi-Fi network when it comes off that home hub or home router device. And a lot of focus has been testing, that Wi-Fi side of the connection in the home to try to understand what's impacting its performance. Is it maybe too many users in the home hogging the connection? Is it poor coverage in the house? The Wi-Fi connection's not able to reach. So that they can isolate, is it really a 5G issue, or is it on the other side of the equation, the Wi-Fi side of it? And what's interesting, that's led a number of the operators we're working with to start a process to upgrade those home router devices this year, moving to the next generation of Wi-Fi 7, to provide more enhanced coverage. I think the other key sort of takeaway just on the quality of experience side is also just the relationship also between sort of mobility subscribers and those fixed wireless access, you being in your home. Now, obviously, a home user consumes a lot more traffic in peak hours than you and I would do, just on our smartphone walking about. And the challenge here is that if you are sharing the same location and the same spectrum, for mobility subscribers with home users at the same time, the same area, could they cannibalize each other? Could one, impact the other service? And again, the key for the operators here was to really be able to identify if that's the case. Do they have enough capacity in those areas to make sure that they're not degrading either user's experience, so that they can guarantee a good quality. And as I said, it's highly lucrative, and I think QoE is becoming a key area here. And benchmarking is a key technique that the operators are focusing on, being able to go out in the field, validate what they're delivering to their customer, but also be able to test how they compare to potentially their competitors as well, and see how they stack up as well. So it's not just a case that they're technically number one, but also that their service is also highly competitive as well.
You mentioned a couple of lucrative areas, and a lot of people have questioned the value of 5G. So, what 5G services provide the best pathways to monetization?
Yeah, I mean, as the one that sort of I just called out a second ago, which has been probably at this early stage the most lucrative, has obviously been that consumer fixed wireless access. But what we identified in the report is really a number of other focus areas which are coming into the foreground now. One of those is really around the next generation of IoT, cellular IoT capabilities, and it's something called RedCap, reduced capability IoT, and it's really trying to target that sort of medium ground between those really sort of low cost, low capability sensors that you typically see with IoT, and those really more expensive high end devices like high definition video cameras, and really trying to sit in the middle there, about that devices that, like wearables that you might have, not only for like sports, but also now for health trackers and hospitals. And also slightly lower capability, say cameras and video equipment that may be used in factories or for surveillance. And this is seen as a potentially a very lucrative area, enabled by the 5G network to provide these lower cost, reduced capability, but still highly performant types of devices. And there was a lot of testing going on last year, both at the device level, but also now on the network readiness level for that. So we do anticipate quite a number of operators to launch RedCap services and devices this year, specifically going towards areas like smart grids and electric supplies, going after the wearable markets with sort of health applications. The second one I would call out, we saw in the report, is very much, a traditional service, but 5G standalone is only about to start offering it, which is roaming. And there's a lot of focus here on not only international roaming, so having those agreements in place, as you move about different countries, that you can still maintain your 5G service, but also for in-network or homebound roaming, moving seamlessly between a private network environment onto the operator's own environment. And we saw a lot of focus around that. And that's really in direct answer to the growing sort of interest around enterprises building out their own private network environments. But also wanting to have a seamless experience of their users being able to move out of that private environment onto, say, the public network. The third, which I think is incredibly interesting, and something I think the industry's been sort of calling out for a while, is around our first responder and our emergency services networks. Mission critical communications has been prime time for a refresh the last few years, and 5G is offering really incredibly huge enhancements to that type of service. Not only bringing priority voice capabilities, but adding data, video, location, proximity, all of the capabilities that the first responders need to provide, an incredibly powerful service in those incredibly, critical environments. And we're seeing that also bleed over into some of the big transport networks like our railways. A number of the large railway networks are built on the legacy GSM-R technology, which is over nearly 20 years old. And now they're taking this opportunity to upgrade to 5G and using mission critical communications there. It's a huge opportunity for the industry, and quite a lucrative one. And I would say the last one, just to call out, is around network slices. One of the key sort of capabilities that 5G sort of marketed in the early days was the ability to slice up the network to provide, different capabilities and priorities and quality for different use cases and different customers. Now, up until this point, most of that has been towards, trials and pilots. But in the last few months, we're now starting to see real commercial offerings come to market. A lot of the testing that we've been involved in is identifying things like security slices for large enterprises, for first responder networks, dedicated slices with high performance for the gaming, for people playing computer games, is a key one as well. And also slices towards the automotive industry to provide very dedicated and specific capabilities when you're out on a vehicle, say on a highway or a freeway. So again, we do anticipate you're going to see what I would say not a killer application coming to generate this revenue, but a range of value-added capabilities for different markets, which are hopefully going to generate some sizable revenue for operators.
So that's interesting. And it certainly seems like your results identified a lot of different pathways to monetization. How are operators preparing for differentiated 5G offerings, and what impact and monetization opportunities does AI bring to their networks?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, the pathways the operators are involved in. I mean, obviously, as we talked about at the very beginning, the key to unlock a lot of this opportunity is that movement to the 5G standalone implementation. And that's really bringing in the 5G cloud native core. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not just a technology shift here; it's an operational and a process shift that they have to think about. And a big part of the focus that a lot of the operators, and we talk about this in the report, are focusing on is leveraging automation capabilities, automation frameworks to help them do that, to help them deal with the volume and velocity of the software releases, the dynamic nature of that environment. And you're seeing increased spending towards what they call sort of continuous integration and delivery pipelines to allow them to actually support that fully automated. You're also seeing them a lot of focus about what they call lab to live transformations. So how do they move those software releases through the various different silo parts of their organization to get it out into an operational network? And again, using automation frameworks to actually to support that. Now, of course, with automation, naturally, you also see AI raise its head because there's sort of a synergetic relationship there. At the end of the day, the output of AI typically is designed to drive enhanced forms of automation on the networks. And many of the operators we're seeing are really focusing on two directions here with AI. The first of those is around utilizing AI themselves for their own internal use cases. So in terms of AI could help them optimize how the network performs, how it's configured, how they could drive better energy efficiency, say through some of their systems, whether it be their radio networks or their routers and switches. The other side of it we're seeing though is how they could be part of the monetization opportunity and how they could offer their network as a service for AI applications and traffic. And we're seeing a real increase in focus here in terms of this realization that, as AI expands and you and I are using it more and more as an application, that traffic going across the networks has to be optimized in a very specific way to deliver the performance that the AI inferencing or even at the back end, the AI training requires. And a lot of the operators are now sort of looking at how could they use their network infrastructure to actually deliver upon that and then look to monetize that, specifically around a couple of key areas. I think the first of those is around something called sovereign AI, which is basically offering AI towards government bodies. And the secondary is around sort of private enterprises, which need sort of a geographical or a logical local AI instance. And again, I think the move we're seeing at the moment is a lot of operators not only optimizing their networks, but also establishing partnerships with some of the large GPU providers or specialist providers, in addition to the sort of the hyperscalers.
And so, what did you find out in the area of 5G standalone device and handset service experience testing?
Yeah, a large, again, back to I suppose, one of the fundamentals about quality of experience we talked about earlier on is that, it's not just the network, which is a key part of what actually delivers you and I a good experience. It's actually the end device, that we're using, the smartphone, the tablet, the home CPE device. A good part of what we're focusing on, or a lot of the testing we get asked to look at, is to help them understand how those other types of devices are performing. Because obviously, different producers of those devices, maybe using different chipsets, different antennas, and the performance can radically change in terms of their overall performance. And again, a large focus area we've been looking at, and we highlight again this in the report, is really trying to understand, number one, the types of services that you and I perceive. And I think it's the perception point is key. So if I'm watching a video, if I'm downloading data, if I'm on a social network, is that performance good enough that I cannot perceive any issues, whether that's coming from the device or from the network? Because I think that's the first fundamental challenge. If it's good enough and you and I as the human can't perceive it, then in many cases, even though there may be performance degradations, maybe at the device level or in the network, maybe I don't need to prioritize them because it's not actually impacting in service. And, that helps operators sort of manage costs down. The secondary side of it is very much around, well, not every device has a human at the end of it, because we're now moving to a world where more and more devices are machines or IoT. And of course, they don't necessarily perceive what you and I do. And they have I would say, more increased or heightened requirements in terms of their performance and the KPIs that need to be met there. So again, a large focus has been sort of looking to test those types of devices. And obviously at this early stage, a lot of that is around, say, fixed wireless access, say CPE devices, where we were asked to go in and help do a lot of testing around this next generation of devices, especially as they start moving to have 5G advanced capabilities combined with, say, Wi-Fi 7, new antenna technologies. Are they delivering the relevant latency throughputs? Are they meeting avoiding specific interference scenarios? So I think, these are some of the big areas, but I would stress it's always fundamentally around experience and performance, whether that's a human perceived experience or it's a machine-based, say, set of KPIs, to make sure that it's delivering on that requirement that you or I need, or the machine or the service needs, not necessarily just a tick box saying, yeah, hey, the network's performing, and that's good enough.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Steve, it's time to pull out the crystal ball. Who are the emerging and future players that are likely to influence the second half of the 5G era?
Yeah, I think there's a number of directions. Some of it will be expansion in what we've talked about, but I think there are some specific new areas coming into it. I mean, you know, we reckon, with some of the operators we work with, is probably anywhere between 125 to 165 billion worth of annual value that could be unlocked in the second half. I think couple of the key areas or predicting here is absolutely we're going to see fixed wireless access expansion going out of just the consumer market more into business to business types and enterprise applications. A large focus also going after multi-dwelling units rather than just homes like large apartments or office blocks. I think you're also going to see a large focus on the what we call the low altitude economy, and these are the drone networks. So drones are obviously, highly popular in many markets today, but they have a huge challenge in terms of flying them what they call beyond visual line of sight. So when you move beyond what you or I as a ground operator, when we can't see the drone anymore, in most markets, today, especially in commercial markets, you have to land that drone. Now that limits its capability for things like logistics and supply chain operations. The 5G network has a huge opportunity to provide basically the surveillance, the radar for the continuous command and control connection to that drone when it flies beyond where you and I can see. And again, that could unlock a huge potential new revenue stream. I think the other key one is also going to be around satellite services. We're in an early stages at the moment of testing that we can receive data, text messages to your smartphone directly from a low Earth orbit satellite without having to modify your smartphone, without having the need for some crazy, huge, big antenna that you would have saw historically on legacy sort of satellite phone devices. Now, there's a huge potential here that as that capability starts to evolve over the next sort of 3 to 5 years, as the standards and this 5G technology increases, that you'll start actually be able to offer also mobile broadband services directly from satellite. Now, that could unlock a large percentage of opportunity in sort of the unconnected and rural areas, but it also could provide you and I, who maybe have good connectivity, just ubiquitous connectivity everywhere and anywhere without seeing those drops. And I think the last one I would sort of call out that I think has got a huge potential is really around augmented reality glasses and possibly even AI assisted glasses as well. Up until this point, a large focus in the early sort of 5G wave was around virtual reality, which obviously has its place. But up until this point, I would say the challenge has been with virtual reality is the adoption curve. These are pretty big headsets that you have to wear. They're also limited to a few specific use cases, and they're not necessarily the most relevant to 5G in terms of mobility. You tend to wear virtual reality mostly in the home, where you're probably more likely connected to a Wi-Fi network. Now, the difference with the spectacles that you and I wear today, we wear them all the time. We're wearing them mobile. We're out and about with them. So we need a mobility connection. And if I can overlay them with augmented reality capabilities where, in the glasses, suddenly I can get directions appearing. I can quickly scan my email. I can get audio and some basic video there. It doesn't need to be the most immersive experience. It's providing me additional value add on top of having to go into my pocket for my smartphone. And what we're seeing at the moment is there's a lot of focus in the industry, and we're being asked to test this combination of these new smart, low form factor, cost efficient glasses with basic AR capabilities being tethered to your handset, to your smartphone, which really acts as the edge device. Now, this could be incredibly game changing because there's already over 2 billion people globally wear glasses. So there's a market already there for it. And number two, we really haven't had any massive disruptor in the form factor of the smartphone in the last maybe 15 years since the first Apple device, which went with a complete, no keyboard. And all of a sudden, glasses could be one of those big disruptors about to happen. And there's a large focus on the industry, the chipset manufacturers, glasses manufacturers, network provider, all looking at this very, very seriously at the moment. And it could be a massive disruption event coming sort of over the next few years. So that's one I would sort of call out. Just look out for that one. But those are sort of the big areas where we're seeing sort of if we gaze into the crystal ball.
Yeah, so we seem to be in interesting times and on the doorstep of those times getting more interesting. So thanks, Steve, for talking with us today and giving us those great insights into Spirent's very comprehensive 6th annual 5G Outlook report. The results are interesting, and we look forward to your next update. And to our audience, please give us a like. And you can find more podcasts at podcast.microwavejournal.com. And thanks for listening.